He shoved the front door open so hard it hit the wall, and his voice tore through the house before I even had time to pull my sweater over my shoulders. "Get out! Today's the day! You're 18! You're done here!" His words were a punch, loud enough that a couple walking their dog stopped on the sidewalk and looked toward our porch. My birthday. My first morning as an adult. And my stepfather was holding the same garbage bag he'd forced me to pack the night before, tossing it at my feet like I was debris he'd waited years to sweep out. My mother stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself, refusing to meet my eyes. Not one word, not one ounce of hesitation. Just silence, as though my existence had always been an inconvenience she couldn't wait to erase. I felt my throat tighten until swallowing hurt. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand why, to ask what I had ever done besides survive in a house that barely tolerated me. But another part, the part that understood cruelty before childhood ended, knew better. I picked up the bag, stepped onto the cold porch, and listened as he said the last thing I ever expected. "And don't come back begging. You're nothing to us now." My name is Talia, and that moment carved a crack in my life I didn't know how to fill. Before I tell you what happened years later, you need to understand how it got to that point. I wasn't always unwanted. There was a time, back when I was 7, when my mother smiled at me like I mattered. That was before she met him. Before David walked into our lives with his sharp suits and charming smile, pretending to care about us while slowly tightening his grip. At first, it was small things. He'd correct the way I held my fork, tell me my laughter was too loud, suggest that maybe I should spend more time in my room so the adults could talk. My mother never defended me. She'd just look away, smoothing her dress, pretending not to notice. I became quieter, smaller, invisible. I told myself it was temporary, that once I was older, things would get better, but they didn't. They got worse. By the time I turned 15, I wasn't a daughter in that house. I was unpaid labor. Cook, clean, stay out of sight. That was my role. The shift happened gradually, like watching storm clouds gather. David became controlling in ways that felt calculated. He'd check my school schedule, not because he cared about my grades, but to make sure I wasn't wasting time. He'd limit how long I could shower, saying utilities weren't free. He'd stand in the doorway of my room, arms crossed, watching me fold laundry, as if waiting for me to make a mistake he could criticize. My mother transformed too. She stopped being the woman who used to braid my hair and hum old songs. She became his echo, his shadow, his enabler. When I tried to talk to her about how he treated me, she'd sigh and say, "Talia, you're being dramatic. David works hard for this family. The least you can do is show some gratitude." Gratitude. For what? For feeling like a stranger in my own home. The emotional distance between us grew into a canyon I couldn't cross. And then, one evening during my junior year, he said it. We were sitting at dinner, and I accidentally knocked over a glass of water. His face darkened. He leaned forward and said, "You know what, Talia? The day you turn 18, you're gone. I'm done dealing with you." That final year was the longest of my life. I tried to be invisible, to avoid triggering his anger. School became my refuge, the only place where I could breathe without feeling like I was taking up too much space. I threw myself into my classes, not because I had big dreams, but because it was somewhere to exist without judgment. At home, the tension thickened like smoke. David began taking away privileges I didn't even realize were privileges. He'd lock the pantry at night so I couldn't eat after dinner. He'd turn off the Wi-Fi router when I was doing homework, saying I was wasting electricity. He'd make comments at the dinner table about how much cheaper their lives would be once I was gone. My mother said nothing. She'd stare at her plate, chewing slowly, pretending she couldn't hear him. I wanted to hate her. But mostly I just felt sad. Sad that she chose him over me. Sad that I'd become so easy to discard. Then came the argument that broke something inside me. I asked if I could stay through the summer after graduation to save money for college. David laughed. He actually laughed. "College? You think you're college material?" My mother finally spoke. "Talia, maybe it's time you learn to stand on your own." The night before my 18th birthday, he threw a garbage bag onto my bed. It landed with a dull thud that echoed in the quiet room. "Pack," he said, standing in my doorway. "I'm not waking up tomorrow with you still here." I stared at the bag, then at him. His face showed no emotion, no hesitation, no doubt, just cold certainty. "You're serious," I whispered. "Dead serious." He turned and walked away, leaving my door open. I heard him downstairs, laughing at something on TV like he hadn't just shattered what was left of my world. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking, and started packing. Clothes, a few books, my journal. The stuffed bear my real father gave me before he died. That was all I had. All I was allowed to take from a house I'd lived in for 11 years. I cried that night, but silently, pressing my face into my pillow so they wouldn't hear. I cried for the childhood I never got to have. For the mother who stopped fighting for me. For the future I couldn't see. But somewhere between the tears and the darkness, something hardened inside me. A promise. I would never need them again. I would survive. And somehow I would prove that I was more than nothing. The first night alone, I slept in my beat-up car. It was a 2003 sedan my mother bought me for my 16th birthday, back when she still pretended to care. The backseat was cramped and cold. Rain drummed against the windows, and every sound made me jump. I was parked behind a gas station, curled under an old blanket, trying to convince myself this was temporary. That morning, I'd driven around for hours, trying to figure out where to go. I had $73 in my wallet, half a tank of gas, and no plan. No friends I could call. No relatives who'd take me in. Just me and a garbage bag of belongings in a car that smelled like old fast food. The cold seeped into my bones. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since the morning before, and I was too scared to spend money on food when I didn't know how long it needed to last. I stared at the ceiling of the car, counting the cracks in the fabric, and thought about David's words. "You're nothing to us now." I wanted to prove him wrong. But sitting there, shivering and alone, I felt like maybe he was right. Maybe I was nothing. Maybe I'd always been nothing. But then I thought about something my real father once told me before he died. "Talia, being knocked down doesn't mean you stay down." I closed my eyes and made a decision. I wasn't staying down. I got my first job 2 days later at a fast food restaurant. The manager barely looked at my application before handing me a uniform and telling me to start the next morning. The work was humiliating. Customers yelled at me over cold fries. My coworkers treated me like I was invisible. I cleaned toilets, mopped floors, and came home to my car, smelling like grease and sweat. I worked double shifts whenever I could, saving every dollar. I showered at a local gym that offered free trial memberships. I ate the cheapest food I could find. I learned to ignore the hunger, the exhaustion, the shame that burned in my chest every time someone looked at me like I didn't matter. At night, parked in different locations to avoid trouble, I'd sit in my car and study. I'd picked up free books from the library about business and personal finance. I didn't know why. I just knew I needed to learn anything that could pull me out of this hole. Weeks blurred into months. I added a second job, cleaning offices at night. I was always tired, always sore, always scared, but I survived. And survival, I learned, was its own kind of strength. Then one night, a coworker named Lisa sat next to me during break. "You ever thought about going back to school?" she asked. I looked at her, confused. She smiled. "There's a program, a local business institute. Night classes, scholarships for people like us." The scholarship program felt like a door I wasn't supposed to walk through. The application asked for essays, references, and proof of hardship. I had plenty of hardship, but no references. No teachers who remembered me. No bosses who cared. I almost gave up. But then I thought about the car, the cold nights, the way David's voice still echoed in my head. I wrote the essay in one sitting in a coffee shop using their free Wi-Fi. I wrote about survival. About being discarded and choosing not to disappear. About wanting to prove that being unwanted didn't mean being worthless. I submitted it at 11:47 p.m. on the deadline, my hands shaking as I hit send. 3 weeks later, I got an email. Interview scheduled. My heart nearly stopped. I borrowed a blazer from Lisa, practiced answers in my car mirror, and showed up 15 minutes early. The interviewer was a woman named Mrs. Chen, older, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who saw through lies. She read my essay, then looked at me. "Why do you want this?" I could have said something polished, something safe. Instead, I told the truth. "Because I need to stop being invisible, I need to matter, and I think education is how I do that." She studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You're in partial scholarship. The rest you'll have to work for." I walked out of that building, sat in my car, and cried. Not sad tears, not scared tears. Relief. The Business Institute changed everything. Night classes were exhausting after working 2 jobs, but I showed up. I took notes. I asked questions. I absorbed everything like I was starving for it. The subjects were practical: accounting, marketing, business communication, professional development. Things I could actually use. I learned how offices worked, how decisions got made, how people in power talked and moved and thought. I studied the students who came from better backgrounds, the ones who seemed confident and comfortable. I watched how they carried themselves, how they spoke up in class, how they asked for what they wanted without apologizing. I started mimicking them, not in a fake way, but in a way that made me feel less small. 6 months in, the Institute helped place me in an internship at a mid-sized corporate firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous. I was filing papers, organizing schedules, and fetching coffee. But I was inside. I was learning. I watched everything. The way managers delegated, the way executives made decisions, who got listened to and why. I learned that competence mattered, but so did presence. So did confidence. I started volunteering for extra tasks. I stayed late. I made myself useful. I asked smart questions. Slowly, people started noticing me, not as an intern, as Talia, the girl who got things done, the girl who saw problems before they happened, the girl who didn't waste anyone's time. One day, my supervisor pulled me aside. "You're good at this. Have you thought about staying long-term?" I had. I just didn't know I was allowed to want it. 2 years into working at the firm, I wasn't an intern anymore. I was a junior analyst, a title that felt like a miracle. I had a desk, a real paycheck, health insurance. I'd moved out of my car and into a tiny studio apartment that smelled like old carpet, but it was mine. My mornings started early. I'd make coffee in my second-hand coffee maker, review reports, and mentally prepare for the day. The work was demanding, but I thrived on it. I learned to anticipate what my managers needed before they asked. I built spreadsheets that made complex data simple. I solved problems quietly, efficiently, without making a fuss. People started relying on me. Small promotions followed. Junior analyst to analyst, analyst to senior analyst. Each step forward felt like proof that I wasn't nothing, proof that David had been wrong. I still thought about him sometimes, about my mother, about that morning on the porch. But the anger had dulled into something colder, something sharper, focus. I didn't want revenge, I wanted success. I wanted to build a life so full, so solid that their rejection became irrelevant. And then, during a quarterly meeting, something happened. One of the senior executives, a man named Mr. Thornton, asked a question about market trends. The room went silent. I hesitated, then raised my hand. I gave my analysis, clear, confidence, backed by data. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "That's sharp thinking. Thank you, Talia." The room noticed. More importantly, he noticed. And that moment changed everything. After that meeting, my name started appearing on different projects, bigger projects. Mr. Thornton requested me specifically for his team on a major client acquisition. I worked long hours refining pitches, analyzing competitor strategies, and preparing presentations. I was nervous, but I didn't let it show. I asked questions when I needed to. I contributed ideas when I had them. I made myself indispensable. The acquisition succeeded. The client signed. Mr. Thornton called me into his office afterward. "You've got instincts most people take years to develop," he said. "Keep this up and you'll go far here." I thanked him, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was racing. Opportunities multiplied. I was invited to strategy meetings, asked to lead smaller projects, given responsibilities that once seemed impossible. I was 23 years old, living in a cramped apartment, still shopping at thrift stores, but I was rising. And people were starting to see it. Then came the promotion. Associate project manager, my own office. A salary that let me breathe without checking my bank account daily. I celebrated alone, sitting on my apartment floor with takeout, staring at the email confirmation like it might disappear. For the first time since that morning on the porch, I felt something close to pride. Not because I'd beaten anyone, but because I'd built something that was mine. Something no one could take away. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. 6 months into my new role, the firm announced a merger. A smaller company was being absorbed into ours, bringing new clients, new projects, and new leadership. The office buzzed with rumors. Some people were excited. Others were nervous about layoffs. I focused on my work, staying out of office politics. Then I saw the name of the company we were merging with, Hartman and Associates. I froze. Hartman, David's last name. I told myself it was a coincidence. Hartman wasn't an uncommon name. But then the executive list was circulated, and there it was, David Hartman, Chief Operations Officer. My stomach dropped. I sat at my desk, staring at his name on the screen, my hands cold. He was coming here, to my building, to meetings I'd be part of. I hadn't seen him or my mother in 5 years. 5 years of silence. 5 years of building a life without them. And now he was walking back into it. The first meeting was scheduled for the following week. Department heads and key personnel from both companies. I'd be there as the associate project manager for the integration team. I thought about calling in sick, thought about requesting a transfer, but something stopped me. A voice inside me, quiet but firm, said, "Don't run. You've earned your place here. He doesn't get to take that from you." So I didn't run. I prepared. I reviewed every document. I memorized every detail. And when the day came, I walked into that conference room with my head high, ready to face the man who threw me away. He walked in 10 minutes late, laughing at something someone said, shaking hands, commanding the room like he always did. He looked older, gray at his temples, a little heavier, but the arrogance was the same, that easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no. I sat 3 seats down from the head of the table, my notepad open, my pen ready. He didn't look at me, not at first. He was too busy performing, talking about synergies and growth opportunities, throwing around buzzwords like he invented them. I stayed quiet, taking notes, watching. Then Mr. Thornton introduced the integration team. When he said my name, my title, David's eyes flicked toward me. For a split second, nothing. Then recognition hit. His face didn't change much. A slight tightening around his eyes, a pause in his smile, but I saw it. He knew exactly who I was. In that moment, I realized something. He was afraid, not of me exactly, but of what my presence here meant, of the questions people might ask, of the power dynamics that had just shifted. I looked back at him, my expression neutral, professional. I didn't smile, I didn't flinch. I just held his gaze for 1 beat longer than necessary. Then I looked back at my notes. Mr. Thornton continued speaking. The meeting went on, but something had changed in that room, and David felt it. After the meeting, he tried to corner me in the hallway. "Talia." His voice was low, careful. I stopped, turned, and waited. He glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "I didn't know you worked here." "Why would you?" I said evenly. He shifted, uncomfortable. "Look, I know things ended badly between us, but that was a long time ago. We're both adults now. We should keep things professional." Professional. The word tasted bitter. "I plan to," I said. "Is there something work-related you needed to discuss?" He blinked. "I just thought we should clear the air." "There's nothing to clear. You made your position very clear 5 years ago. I'm simply here to do my job." I turned to walk away. He reached out like he was going to touch my arm, then thought better of it. "Talia, please keep any future discussions work-related, Mr. Hartman." I didn't wait for a response. I walked away, my heart pounding but my steps steady. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop. I pulled up everything I could find on Hartman and Associates, public records, financial filings, client reviews, news articles. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for information, because information was power. And I'd learned in the years since he threw me out that power wasn't something you were given. It was something you took. What I found made me sit back in my chair. Hartman and Associates was struggling. Badly. Debt. Client losses. Internal complaints about leadership. The merger wasn't a partnership. It was a rescue. And David needed it to succeed. He needed us. Which meant he needed me. Over the next few weeks, I played it perfectly. Cold politeness. Professional distance. In meetings, I addressed him the same way I addressed everyone else. No special treatment. No personal history. Just facts, data, and project timelines. It drove him crazy. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened when I spoke. The way he'd try to interrupt me, only to be cut off by Mr. Thornton or someone else who valued my input. He tried to speak to me privately 3 more times. Each time, I redirected the conversation to work. Each time, I walked away before he could say whatever guilt-soaked thing he'd rehearsed. My mother never reached out. I didn't expect her to, but I thought about her sometimes. I wondered if she knew where I was, if she cared, if she regretted anything. Probably not. People like her didn't regret it. They were justified. Meanwhile, I kept working. The integration was complex, full of overlapping departments and conflicting processes. I led the team that streamlined operations, cutting redundancies, identifying inefficiencies. I was good at it, better than good. I saw patterns others missed, solutions others overlooked, and people noticed. Especially the board members overseeing the merger. During one review meeting, a board member named Ms. Calloway asked for my assessment of Hartman and Associates' operational structure. I gave it, honest, data-backed, unflinching. David sat across the table, his face reddening as I outlined the financial mismanagement, the leadership gaps, the decision-making failures that had brought his company to the brink. I didn't attack him. I didn't need to. I just presented the facts, and the facts were damning enough. After that meeting, I started digging deeper, not out of spite, out of necessity. The integration was my responsibility, and I needed to understand what we were actually absorbing. I requested access to Hartman and Associates' internal files, financial records, client contracts, employee performance reviews. What I found was worse than I expected. Hidden debt, inflated performance projections, vendor contracts that locked the company into unfavorable terms. Shady, not illegal, but deeply unethical. David had been propping up a failing company with smoke and mirrors, and now he was trying to offload the mess onto us. I compiled everything into a report, clean, organized, devastating. I didn't present it yet. I wasn't sure I would, but I had it. And that was enough for now. One evening, I was working late when Mr. Thornton stopped by my office. "You've been quiet about Hartman," he said, leaning against the doorframe. I looked up. "I'm gathering information." And I hesitated. Then I made a choice. There are significant risks we need to consider. Financial discrepancies, operational instabilities. If we proceed without addressing them, they'll become our problem. He studied me for a long moment. "Put together a presentation. We're meeting with the board next week. I want your assessment." I nodded. He turned to leave, then paused. "You've worked with David Hartman before." My chest tightened. "A long time ago, different context." He nodded slowly. "Good. Then you'll be objective." He left. I sat in the quiet office, staring at the report on my screen. Objective? Yes, that's exactly what I'd be. The next week, I built alliances. Not overtly, subtly. I presented findings to key executives. I shared concerns with board members during informal conversations. I framed everything as risk mitigation, not personal vendetta, because it wasn't personal. It was professional. I was protecting the company. The executives already had doubts about David. I wasn't creating suspicion. I was confirming it. Ms. Calloway was the most receptive. She'd been skeptical of the merger from the beginning, and my data validated her instincts. "This is thorough work, Talia," she said after I walked her through the financials. "If even half of this is accurate, we have a serious problem." "It's all accurate. I've triple-checked everything." She nodded. "The board needs to see this." The presentation was scheduled. I had 5 days to prepare. 5 days to make sure every number, every claim, every conclusion was bulletproof. I worked around the clock. I anticipated every question, every challenge, every possible defense David might mount. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was trying to expose the truth. If that destroyed him, that was on him. The morning of the presentation, I stood in front of my mirror adjusting my blazer. I looked different than I had 5 years ago. Stronger, steadier, sure of myself. I thought about the girl on the porch, holding a garbage bag, being told she was nothing. And I thought about the woman I'd become. The woman who walked into boardrooms and spoke with authority. The woman people listened to. I smiled. Not a cruel smile, just a quiet acknowledgement. I wasn't nothing. I never had been. He just couldn't see it. The boardroom was full. Executives, department heads, board members, and David. He sat near the front, arms crossed, looking confident, like he'd already won. Mr. Thornton introduced me. I stood, connected my laptop to the projector, and began. I didn't start with accusations. I started with context. The merger's goals, the expected benefits, the integration challenges. Then I shifted to the risks. Financial inconsistencies, overstated projections. Vendor lock-ins that would cost us millions. Operational gaps that would require significant restructuring. I presented it all calmly, methodically, with slides and data and sources, no emotion, just facts. David's confidence faded. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, tried to interject. "Those numbers are taken out of context," he said. I nodded. "Let me provide the full context." I pulled up the complete financial statements. The board reviewed them in silence. Then Ms. Calloway spoke. "Mr. Hartman, these projections you provided during merger negotiations, they don't match the actual performance data." David stammered. "There were adjustments made for market conditions. Adjustments that were never disclosed," I said quietly. The room went still. Mr. Thornton leaned forward. "Are you saying Hartman and Associates misrepresented their financial standing?" "I'm saying the data we were given doesn't align with the data I've verified independently." Whether that's misrepresentation or miscommunication, the board will have to decide. But either way, it's a risk. David's face turned red. This is absurd. Who is she to? She's the associate project manager leading this integration, Mr. Thornton cut in. And her job is to identify risks, which she's done. The meeting continued, but the damage was done. David tried to recover, tried to explain, but every word made it worse. By the end, the board requested a full audit of Hartman and Associates before proceeding. David left the room without looking at me. Audit took 3 weeks. During that time, David avoided me. He stopped trying to talk to me privately, stopped showing up to integration meetings. He knew what was coming. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just kept working. The audit results confirmed everything I'd presented. And worse, falsified performance reports, hidden liabilities, contractual obligations that would have bankrupted us if we'd proceeded blindly. The board called an emergency meeting. David wasn't invited. I was. Ms. Calloway addressed the room. Based on these findings, we're terminating the merger. Hartman and Associates does not meet our standards for partnership. Mr. Thornton looked at me. Talia, your diligence saved this company from a catastrophic mistake. Thank you. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. But inside, something settled. A weight I didn't know I'd been carrying lifted. That evening, I was leaving the building when I saw him. David was standing by his car in the parking garage, staring at his phone. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. I could have walked past. Should have, but I didn't. I stopped a few feet away. He looked up. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You did this." "No," I said quietly. "You did this. I just made sure people saw it." He laughed bitterly. "You've been waiting for this. All these years you've been waiting to ruin me." I shook my head. "I wasn't waiting for anything. I was building a life. You were just in the way." His jaw clenched. "I gave you a home. You gave me a garbage bag and a door." I stepped closer. "You told me I was nothing. I simply proved you wrong." I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. He didn't call out. He just stood there alone in the parking garage watching me leave. And I realized I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. David's company collapsed within months. The failed merger triggered a cascade of consequences. Clients pulled out. Investors demanded explanations. Employees spoke up about his leadership, the bullying, the favoritism, the corner-cutting. His reputation imploded. I heard about it through office gossip. Someone mentioned seeing an article about Hartman and Associates filing for bankruptcy. Someone else said David had been forced out by his own board. I didn't seek out the details. I didn't need to. His downfall wasn't my victory. It was just the natural consequence of his choices. Meanwhile, my career continued to rise. Mr. Thornton recommended me for a senior leadership position. I interviewed with the executive committee. I presented my vision for the company's future. I answered their questions with confidence I'd earned through years of hard work. A week later, I got the call. Senior project director. My own team. A corner office with windows overlooking the city. I sat in that office on my first day, looking out at the skyline and thought about the girl sleeping in her car. The girl cleaning toilets. The girl who was told she was nothing. She'd made it, not by destroying someone else, but by building herself, by refusing to stay small, by proving every single day that she was worth something. My mother never reached out. I didn't expect her to. Some people don't apologize. They just fade into the background of your life, becoming less relevant with each passing year. I was okay with that. I didn't need her validation anymore. I had my own. 2 years passed. I thrived in my new role. I led major projects, mentored junior analysts, built a reputation as someone who saw opportunities others missed. One afternoon, my assistant told me someone was asking for me in the lobby. No appointment, just showed up. I almost said I was busy, but something made me curious. I went down. It was my mother. She looked older, tired. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "Talia," she said, her voice small. I stared at her, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a strange emptiness. "What do you want?" "I wanted to see you, to talk." "After 7 years," she flinched. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I need you to know I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. I waited for something inside me to react, for tears or rage or relief, but there was nothing. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay. You're sorry, I heard you. Is there anything else?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Talia, please. I made mistakes. I should have protected you. I should have chosen you. I know that now." "You're right, you should have." She reached for my hand. I stepped back. "I can't undo the past," she said. "But maybe we could start over. Maybe we could." "No," she froze. "I don't want to start over. I don't want a relationship with you. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm also not interested in pretending we're something we're not. Talia, you made your choice 7 years ago. I've made mine now." I turned toward the elevator. She called after me, "Please don't shut me out." I stopped, looked back. "I'm not shutting you out, you were never in." The elevator doors closed. I rode up to my office, sat at my desk, and got back to work. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just moved forward, because that's what I'd learned to do. Life continued, beautifully, quietly, on my own terms. I bought my first home at 29, a small house with a yard and a front porch that didn't hold any bad memories. I stood in the doorway the day I moved in, keys in hand, and felt something I'd never felt before. Peace. The house was mine, chosen by me, paid for by me, filled with furniture I picked out and books I loved and pictures of people who actually cared about me. I didn't think about David much anymore. Occasionally, I'd see his name in a business article, usually in the context of cautionary tales about mismanagement. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt indifferent. He was a chapter I'd closed, a storm I'd survived. My mother tried reaching out a few more times. Emails, letters, I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. I'd forgiven her, not for her, but for me. But forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It just meant I wasn't carrying her weight anymore. My career kept growing. I was promoted to vice president. I spoke at conferences. I mentored young professionals who reminded me of my younger self, people who felt invisible, people who'd been told they weren't enough. I told them what no one told me. Your past doesn't define your potential. Your worth isn't determined by who rejected you. You build your value by showing up, working hard, and refusing to disappear. And they listened, because they could see I'd lived it. One evening, I was at a work event, a networking dinner for industry leaders, when someone approached me. A younger woman, maybe 22, nervous but determined. "Excuse me, are you Talia?" I smiled. "I am. I heard you speak at a conference last year about resilience, about building yourself from nothing." She paused. "I just wanted to say thank you. I was living in my car when I heard it. I didn't think I'd ever get out, but your story made me believe I could." My throat tightened. "Are you out now?" She nodded. "I got a job, got an apartment, I'm taking night classes." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "You did that, not me. You chose not to give up." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "But you showed me it was possible." She walked away, and I stood there feeling something I hadn't expected. Gratitude, not for the success, not for the title or the office or the salary, but for the journey, for the pain that had shaped me, for the rejection that had forced me to find my own strength. I wouldn't have chosen that path, but I wouldn't trade who I'd become because of it. That night, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my porch. The same porch I'd stood on the day I moved in. I thought about the girl with the garbage bag. The girl is sleeping in her car. The girl who was told she was nothing. And I smiled, because she wasn't nothing. She never had been. She just needed the world to get out of her way, so she could prove it. Years later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from a lawyer, informing me that David had passed away. Heart attack, no service, no family mentioned, just a brief notice. I sat with the letter for a long time, waiting to feel something. Relief, sadness, closure, but there was nothing. He'd already been gone from my life for so long that his actual death changed nothing. I thought about the man who'd thrown me out, the man who'd told me I was nothing. And I realized he'd never known me, not really. He'd seen a child he could control, a burden he could discard. But he'd never seen the person I was becoming, the person I became, and that was his loss, not mine. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. That was the last time I thought about him. My life was full, rich with friendships, work I loved, a home that felt safe. I traveled. I learned new things. I helped people who needed help. I lived a life that was entirely mine, and that, I realized, was the best revenge, not destroying him, not making him suffer, but building something so beautiful, so fulfilling, so complete, that his rejection became irrelevant. He'd tried to make me feel small. Instead, he'd freed me to become something he could never understand. Someone who didn't need his approval. Someone who'd outgrown the need for revenge. Someone who'd simply moved on and thrived. I'm 34 now. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I think about that morning. The garbage bag, the cold porch, the words that were supposed to break me. And I realize that moment wasn't an ending. It was the beginning. The moment they threw me out was the moment I walked toward the life that was always meant for me. A life I had to build alone. A life no one could take credit for. A life that was entirely, completely mine. I don't hate them anymore. I don't think about them much at all. They're just people who made choices. Choices that hurt me. Choices that ultimately freed me. I've learned that some people come into your life to teach you what you don't want, what you won't accept, what you're capable of surviving. David taught me I was stronger than I knew. My mother taught me I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. And the girl I used to be taught me that rock bottom isn't where you stay. It's where you rebuild. I stand on my porch now, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. The same girl who once had nothing now has everything that matters. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I refuse to stay there. So here's my question to you. What would you do in this situation? If you've ever felt discarded, overlooked, or told you weren't enough, I hope my story reminds you. Your value isn't determined by who rejected you. It's determined by what you build after they leave. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories about resilience, redemption, and rising above, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Thank you for listening. And remember, you're not nothing. You never were.